It is March somehow, which means we are 2 months into the hellscape that is 2025, but there's nothing I like more than escaping from whatever is going on outside by reading books and talking about them. So, we're going to talk about the books that I read in February. First, some stats. I read 10 books this year, and yes, they were all audiobooks. I'm not here for the audiobook versus reading debate, okay? I consumed 10 books. That was 115 audiobook hours, 6 different authors, and 6 of the books I had read before. Of the fantasy genre, I read 5, all of which were written by the incredible Brandon Sanderson. I did the entire Mistborn First Era, Final Empire, Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages. I also read Warbreaker and Way of Kings for the first time. And of those 5, I think this month my favorite was definitely Well of Ascension. I feel like it hit a lot of things that I really needed, dealing with a lot of stuff regarding hopelessness and the importance of fighting when it seems like there's no chance. But all really good reads. Love Brandon Sanderson. Moving on to the romance books that I read. Now, the first of the romance books that I read could also be considered fantasy, but this is my video, so I do what I want. So first book actually of the month was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, finishing off the Empyrean series as it is so far published. Had a good time, enjoyed it. It is what it is. I'm not here to talk about, the pros and cons of what Empyrean does for people. And then the second romance book that I read this month was Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn. This is Benedict's story in the Bridgerton series, and of those two, I think Offer from a Gentleman was definitely my favorite this month. It was a reread. I'd read it before last year, and it's just fun. I just love Benedict. It was a great time. Moving on to the nonfiction books, the last 3 books that I read this month. Still Life with Bones by Alexa Haggerty. I read this last year. It was actually my #1 nonfiction book of last year, and I reread it because the book group that I go to with my mom and sister was doing it for this month. Great book, painful to read, but definitely worth it. I read Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, which I felt like I could not rate as I normally rate my books because of its status as a primary source. And just a lot of things, and my full review of it goes into some of the details of how I felt reading that. But still a very worthwhile read, glad that I read it. And I read The Rise and Fall of Dinosaurs by Steve Buscemi. I should have written it down the name. Oh well. But of those 3, I really enjoyed Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. I'm not a sciencey person. I've never been into dinosaurs beyond thinking, oh, big bones, those are cool. But this was a really fun read. I really enjoyed reading it. I think it's a good one for someone who's wanting to branch out into more nonfiction and read something that's maybe not bogged down in the science, but still helps you learn something. And of those 3, I do think Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs was my favorite nonfiction of this month. And of all 10 books that I read this month, my #1, now these ratings are not necessarily what I think is the best book, but just what I enjoyed the most, or what I thought I needed for reading this month. My #1 was definitely Well of Ascension, of the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said, it's a lot of really helpful themes regarding fighting hopeless battles and finding hope. #2, Hero of Ages, also Mistborn series, also Brandon Sanderson. A lot of the same things, continuing those same stories. And the #3 book of this month was Way of Kings, also by Brandon Sanderson. It was Brandon Sanderson month for me, guys. I've read all of Mistborn before, but I'm branching out and reading the rest of the Cosmere, and I really enjoyed Way of Kings. It was long, but absolutely worth it. So, yeah, if you want to see the full reviews for all of the books that I read this month and all the books that I've read so far this year, check out the rest of my page. They're all on there. They're on my highlight reel on Instagram. They're all up there. So I will see you next month for March's books. Let's see how many I read.